banning something is okay, I suppose, for some reason. But if you do it on a grand scale, you are going to fail in a grand scale. We know where it's going to end. We have to address the problem domestically. If you don't increase productivity, you can't sustain it. Bite the bullet and make the changes that need to be changed. Check the amount, the cost of inputs that you use, and you measure it against the output that is produced. So if you have high productivity, that means at the same level of use of inputs, say capital and labor, then you can get a high output. It could be many things. It could be like better organization of the institute, the enterprise, some technological change, some management input, some other company that wants to buy your output more than before. So all those things are there. The important point to remember is that the principles are the same, whether you are talking about a firm or a company or a country. The same principles apply, but you would measure it in a different way. So if I just take a simple idea of a shoe factory producing, shall we say, argument, 100 shoes a day. Now, if they can increase that at the same use of inputs, then you say their productivity has increased. On the other hand, if they do some change and for the same input that they use, capital, labor, you get a lower output, then of course your productivity has declined. This is a very simple idea, and people use in everyday conversation. You can say that enterprise or that company is efficient. It is able to get more out of its capital, more out of its labor. So now if you talk about a country, we use the term total factor productivity, or sometimes called the multiple factor productivity. So the idea is the same. You have capital, you have land, you have labor. If you want to put another thing, you can put in enterprise. All those things produce your national gross domestic output. That is the amount of goods and services that a country produces normally within a year. So if a country is growing rapidly, so for example, we have been growing rather slowly in the last 3 years. Earlier, our average growth rate for Sri Lanka over 50 years was close to 4.3%. But for some reason that we really have to inquire better, although we haven't done very well yet, is that our growth rate fell to, last time we measured it, to 2.3% from the average of 4.1%. So my suspicion is that our productivity failed. Of course, we had a very good situation. For example, as we mentioned before, 78 to 1994, and after the end of our war, 30-year war, between 2009 and 2014-15, we had really got a bump in our output, bump in our production. GDP went up, gross domestic product went up. It reached 8% at one stage after the war. Then it fizzled out. So why? So it is not that we cannot get to it, but actually we can't be ending wars. So the most practical thing to think, we can change policies in order to affect the total factor productivity. And we have in this, later I am going to talk to you about that such measures have been done by our people and some people from outside the country. That gives us some idea where we should be focusing in order to raise total factor productivity. I must say these things before we go further. Without raising total factor productivity, we cannot raise GDP growth rate. So if you see a country that has grown very fast, most of the time that is because they increased their productivity. They became more efficient. So now China case, growing by 10%, did have increase in productivity. They opened up the economy. A lot of people came from the rest of the world, and it became the factory for the world. Everything that you see either in Sri Lanka or United States or United Kingdom, you see made in China, made in China. When they opened the economy, they had a vast demand for products. A lot of people located their companies in China because labor was very clever, efficient, well trained, hardly ever went on strike. And so they demonstrated that by adopting good policies, which they did, particularly after the reforms in the mid-80s, they did very well. And certain other countries also began to do this, what are called East Asian countries even earlier. They started opening their economies, particularly after 1965, the 4 countries that I mentioned, which in usual parlance of economy, they call it the 4 tigers. Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan. But when they started increasing their output through productivity growth, some economists, famous economists, Nobel Prize winner now, Paul Krugman and one of his co-authors, Young, they found out this could not be sustained. Why? Because their growth was not basically based on productivity increase, but by investing more capital, more labor, and more traditional inputs. So such a situation cannot continue, because let's take about this. So if you can increase, as they did, their output by 8%, 9%, even as high as 10%, in order to maintain that rate, then they had to continue investing larger and larger amounts of money from savings to raise the increase. Now, another way economists know that once you start increasing savings, you have to suppress consumption somewhere. So you cannot really sustain such a system if you are going to invest money by letting people starve or have lower levels of living, standards of living. So this issue of looking at productivity became even more important, because they say the so-called miracle of the East Asian countries was not a miracle, because they started investing money, and in order to invest more money, they had to get save it. To save it, you have to reduce consumption. So nowadays we know that is a mixture of 2 things. You need the so-called factor augmentation, increasing capital and labor, at the same time also improving your productivity. If you don't increase productivity, you can't sustain it. Number 1. Number 2 is that if you don't have increased productivity, then you can't achieve higher rates of economic growth. So that much we know. Now let's talk about Sri Lankan case. Sri Lankan case, our total factor productivity has not been very impressive. So our average growth rate has been around 4.1 to 4.3% over a 50-year period. That's not a very bad record, particularly because very fortunately for us, our population rate has been quite steady, low compared to our neighbors, certainly compared to other countries at our same level of income. So actually we are outlier that way. In other words, compared to our level of income, we should have had a higher birth rate. I take it back, low birth rate. So even at low levels of income, we have low birth rate for reasons that are peculiar or confined to Sri Lanka, which is a good thing. So per capita income is actually output growth, GDP growth minus the population increase. Population increase last so many 10-15 years have been 1%, now below 1%. So that has saved us We don't have more mouths to feed than like some other countries who are struggling because of a high population growth. But the interesting point is that our growth rate has been fluctuating as growth rates do in countries, but productivity is particularly sporadic. So we had a jump in productivity after the reforms of 1978 to 94. Then the next time we had a jump in our productivity is after the war. So now we can't start a war to have productivity go up again. The logical thing is to change our policies in order to give encouragement to increase productivity. It's called incentives. So half of economies, or even more than half, is about incentives. How do people react to the incentives? Farmers, manufacturers, industrialists, people who produce goods and services, they need some inducement. It's inducement in terms of profit, instead of reducing better opportunities for them to operate their little shops or large factories. So when we found that when we gave them that inducement in 1978 to 94 period, we responded, but we didn't sustain it. That is the problem. And the argument why it cannot be sustained is that because in order to sustain output growth of the order of that type, you have to have productivity growth. Without productivity growth, it's going to fizzle out. That's another reason though why our output was not maintained. Political economy, in the sense that we have what my old professor Indraratne used to call Tattumaru system. That is, some people come to power, they follow one set of policies, the other people come and they completely reverse it and go another part of thing. So we had no consistent policy. So our total factor productivity has not been very impressive. Some have been hardly 2%. The study that I can refer now to, believe it or not, done by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis on Sri Lanka, showed that we hardly was able to get to 1.5%, 5% for a 20-year period. That is very low. If you compare countries like us at our same level of resources, they were doing much better, 2-3%. So just see, because our productivity is low, there's opportunity to do more than a country that is already reached 3-4%. So in other words, there's a potential there. One I think I want to say, go back to a little bit what we said before, why our policy changed from one administrator to other is we are a democracy. We enjoy the fruits of a democracy. That's very important. So one of the other sides of the story is that while our productivity also was sporadic, that is because our politics was sporadic. That is the outcome of a democracy. So I don't think we can complain against that. That is one reason why we went from one side to the other. Our economic literacy of our general population, to be very frank, is not very good. It is the fault of the economists, this profession, that not explaining to the people what it means to have productivity growth, what is GDP, gross domestic product, how are we doing compared to our neighbors, what should we do in order to raise our growth rate, to raise our income level, to address issues of poverty, to get employment to younger generation that's coming on stream. It is at a lower rate than other countries because of low population. But we have to keep on growing and to enjoy the benefits of that growth through employment and have more goods and services to enjoy. And so we need to look at it that way. Our general population should be better educated through my profession and your profession. We have not done a very good job. So maybe that we can go and look at curriculum of what we are teaching and introduce very simple ideas. What do day-to-day economics mean for people? What do we mean by saving, investment? How have the other countries done? Starting from lower level than we were. For example, Singapore had a lower level of income compared to us in the 1950s. And look where she is now, or it is, and we are. We sort of lost some opportunities, but they were consistently following good economic policies. The other thing is that when one of the enterprises did not do well, but supported by the government, they just said, that's it. They closed it down. In our case, we did not do that. We continued to finance the deficits, low productivity, low income, high loss enterprises for a long time. So did Korea. They did some very important things. They maintained macroeconomic stability, meaning they didn't allow inflation rate to rise. They didn't allow with their balance of payments to be difficult to have large current account deficits. So they created the stable economic environment, and they removed various barriers to the private enterprise, first of all, to invest and to learn from the rest of the world. They sent many people to study in the United States, for example, and Britain, and increased the stock of tertiary educated Koreans. And then they follow this policy of when some group wants to enter to some industry, they encourage and help them. They did not say this is where you should invest. They allowed that choice to be made by the people who really are risking their capital. Now that's a very important point here. Those people outside, if they are sort of so-called non-public goods, if they are talking about goods that are commercial goods that people make a profit out of it, then choices made by people risking their money will always be better than choices made by bureaucrats in the 7th floor of a building. Right? So because there is a penalty to the wrong decision. Whereas if the chap who is on the 7th floor working for a public government department make those choices, then there is no penalty to him. So they go on doing this over and over again. Like this is the story of most of our public enterprises. So if you want to really have a high productivity growth, then we have to have some discipline and say we are not prepared to keep on covering your losses. You have to get out of the business. I mean, there are very famous enterprises that we have. I won't mention them. Everybody knows that are making loss year after year in, year after, and we keep them. So for an enterprise, a party that is in the business to make profits and develop it their own company or firm, we will be very careful about choosing, weigh the risks of the situation and undertake an investment that will give them a higher return. The other thing you can do is that we can learn from country. We can invite people to come here and invest, called foreign direct investment. I mean, look at the countries like that are having very large foreign direct investment. China, Vietnam, Cambodia, they have large foreign investors. They are not xenophobic like many countries, sometimes including our country. We are worried about foreigners coming and investing, but actually maybe a few centuries ago we had people who came and invested in Sri Lanka. That's why we are able to now enjoy the fruits of tea, rubber and coconuts, and mostly tea and rubber. So that type of opening is is there for us also. Look at it, our FDI in our country the last 5-6 years is very low, less than 2%. It's rising very rapidly in India, Vietnam I mentioned. other countries that are entering. Now the Pakistani Prime Minister going around the world inviting people to come and invest in Pakistan. And so it is mutual benefit. They get profit that they can take out. We get benefit from, we get keep a part of the profit. And it's under our regulatory system. It is no longer alien. I mean, they had to operate within our system. So in all these countries that people who invest in China have to follow Chinese rules, and Chinese rules are made in such a way that foreigners, it's attractive to foreigners. So it's not a big deal. I mean, we could do that too. So Sri Lanka would do, I will come to this later, Sri Lanka do very well to invite people who have the knowledge and the ability to go and come and get our younger population also involved to start good enterprises. Look at where there is increased demand or increasing demand, and set up enterprises depending on the type of location, the type of concession they will get. Not too much concessions as we had done in the past, but that gives them a return that is worth their while. And because also there's competition. All our countries we are competing for foreign investment. And so that is how it is going to be. So if you provide a more favorable climate, then they will come and invest in this country. Now I talked about private enterprise with respect to private area. There are public areas that the government will have to do, like for example law and order, preliminary investments in education and health. We have these very good things about our health and our education system, although the quality of the education system people say have been going down, particularly at the tertiary level. And we have our language skills our English speakers are much less than in the universities in the past. So we can address those things, and there are countries that are teaching their staff. For example, I give you a simple number. China invites about 7,500 American students every year to come and teach in their school during summer. So they go, they get paid very well, they enjoy the experience to go to a fascinating country like China, and they spend 3 months there during the summer university vacation, come back. Both sides benefit. And so then also the people who work in even factories and like in these enterprises also can attend to those classes, and even outside the formal education system. So knowledge is a very important thing for productivity, and so if we can get that thing, knowledge going, that's one of the surest way of doing it. You will have to continue to be raising savings, which means you are keeping consumption down. And in a country like ours, we can't keep consumption down. People are hoping to have more goods and services, the ability to dress well, eat well, play well. So the government will have to respond by creating the condition that will raise productivity. So leads to the question, what are these things that they can do? Well, we already referred in the last few minutes about foreign direct investment. We can be very welcoming to foreign direct investment. Not unless giving a very large tax holidays. In fact, that is counterproductive. Reasonable, competitive rate of foreign direct investment, like our peer countries are also offering, but India is offering, Pakistan is offering, with Thailand is offering, has offered in fact. There are huge complex of Toyota factories in Thailand, and they say that in the next decade, India is going to be the largest producer of motor cars in the world, right? And there are also, particularly the Madras area, they have facility to the language, they can read instructions, highly technologically, very well educated technology group of technical people already there, And they can be themselves entrepreneurs working with others who are financiers, like what happened in California, the money makers getting together with the people who have ideas to produce things like Apple, so that can happen. That is now going to be universally happening. If we combine to one place, everybody will be better off because of that. We get better income, better jobs, high level of living standard. All these will come from greater specialization and being open to the rest of the world. So FDI is one. Keep the economy open, that anybody who can buy and sell with us without great barriers at all, being put in place. So that is why what happened in 78, suddenly we had a very difficult system of control. Some people said it was like the Soviet Union, our level of control. Nearly 100% of our imports are controlled. Okay, I know because I was in Sri Lanka at that time. The central bank guy in charge of the foreign exchange, control of foreign exchange, used to go every morning with a file and sitting to see the Minister of Finance to show him what people are applying to get cars and how they should be given, those other people should not be given, all manner of things that are really wasteful to do the minutiae for a man minister who could have done, large policy, very smart people. They were caught up in this control system and they abandoned it. When they abandoned it, like people went on a real binge and invested there, and we got a real jump up in our growth rate. People are doing well, You didn't have to, earlier people could not get married because they had to go to somebody and get a permit to buy a new sari and a suit, right? And so the children's baby food were ration. Any family was given one tin of baby food. Actually, I have been in the queues for that thing, and then they get a new tin. It was called Infamil. Before they sell it, you bang it on the floor because you cannot resell it. It was so ridiculous thing that happened. And so we didn't have to do that. We wasted a lot of time. So we have little time. We can't be doing that again. We have to learn from it. Unfortunately, people who are in this generation live today don't know that story. That must be well known. The world is open to us particularly because our productivity is low. They have opportunity to go forward and produce more. There's a famous story of Bata company. They sent 2 people to Africa. One guy came and said, they are not wearing shoes, there is no market. The guy said, they are not wearing shoes, we can introduce shoes to them. And that make a big difference. Actually, I have met Mr. Bata. He was invited for a bank conference, and he introduced himself. I am F.W. Bata, I am a shoe salesman, he said. This multimillionaire, his company is in Canada. So, the opportunities are there, and we have clever people who can do those things. I have no doubt about that. Well, there are other opportunities. Reorder the education system. The people get trained for jobs for job opportunities. There are countries like Germany and in Japan where in the university itself they train people. They financed by the big companies. They will say we need 400 engineers. By that, okay, go to the Faculty of Engineering and say, look, we are going to offer you a student to come here and do engineering degree out by 3 years. We are going to pay their fees. What's more, at the end of it, we hire them. So both sides benefit from it, right? So as I said earlier, now the COVID time, people can learn English, for example, or mathematics with the best people in the country to go and teach those courses. They don't have to be confined to a school room anymore. You can be imparting this knowledge openly, open source make it available to everybody. Then there are other things, learning from others, send people to be trained, open your opportunities to come and say, if you want to come and work in our tea industry, learn all these things, let's talk about it. We cannot be hiding and say, no, we are keeping the technology ourselves. Now, our technology, for example, in textile is unbelievably good. People don't talk about it. They say we are only no, they have completely changed the way the technology of producing garments, producing items that are used in garments, from elastics to various other things that are part of a garment, per garment. And so there are opportunities to do it. Why didn't we get it? Because there are a lot of restrictions in the system. And so if we look at this carefully and say there are certain things we can remove these restrictions, because they are not helping us actually. They are sort of blocking the system from working to our advantage. And people would like to come and work in a country like this. Now we have port city, anybody can come and invest. We have Hambantota. There are opportunities, actually the agreements allow for anybody to come and invest in this country without any restraint, as we had in the after the latter part of 1970. So I believe there are opportunities for us to increase total factor productivity by being open. That actually the work that was done, I should mention this, by Professor Jayatilaka Bandara and Dr. Tilak Lianarachi. They did a very good study on total factor productivity, the most recent one. And they have done very rigorous work. They are technical work which they are not, I don't want to give an equation and then lose the audience. We can see that the FDI is there, opening to the trade is there, a good stable macroeconomic situation is there, giving better opportunities or good training for people to fit into the industrial sector are there. Those things will help. And even in one of the variables that they run that improve productivity is also to reduce corruption. So that is also there. So there are so many things that we can work on. And if that is, so when we consider looking the next 5 years, these things can be put in place. But as I said, one government comes and does something, the other government does something else. So there is no policy consistency. So a country, for example, big country, shall we just say for the sake of argument, in Germany, wants to new venture to produce some product, it will look around and say, where are they going to get the raw material, imports at the cheapest in the world. Now, from now, because of the way that our transport system has become so efficient, international transport, and because we have technology that we can shadow and follow what other countries are doing, and they can sit at a computer and buy and sell all these opportunities. So there's a very close connection among countries, production that is joined from rest of the world. So as I gave the example of Ford Motor Company buying goods and raw material from 46 countries, today it will be, I won't be surprised, it should be 3 times that. So even the smallest country can participate. So they don't have to wait till they grow up and they can participate. I give the example of that Sri Lanka has parts produced for the BMW, and people get very excited outside this country. Oh, we produce. I said we produce the rubber part of the Viper, and that is good enough. I mean, if you produce enough, we can make a lot of money out of it instead of trying to produce BMW. That will be a disaster for us. But we will come there. We learn stage by stage. So in other words, there are opportunities there. Even when you build a shoe, now there are various ways of producing shoes. There was a story that you can use textile to produce shoes these days. So there are opportunities right there by tapping into the production network. The first thing to be able to tap to the production network is to be open. So people can invest here, so we can buy goods and services, so we can offer to others. So we see some countries advertising to buy some important input, and then we can say, yeah, no, we can match the price. We are able to give you so many units of this within this time at this price. And so this competition is going to help us very much, because in a way every country has some comparative advantage. You know, that's if somebody in a meeting where I came and said, no, they have no comparative. I said, no, that is all wrong. We have to find the value of the goods and the value of the inputs we are using, like how much we are paying for capital to borrow from the markets, how much is wage rates for labor, how much we are paying for land rents, or how much we are getting electricity connection, how much we are paying for water, all those things. Then the common denominators, you have to add them together. I mean, you have to have it in terms of value terms, otherwise you can't add. That's the only way to add. That's okay. So here output, and is the ratio again, like in a pumps, the ratio of output to inputs. Okay. So now the best way, most people follow what is called Cobb-Douglas production function. Now this is a fancy word for relationship. We can write it in symbols, but it's just a relationship. People then applied the work that Professor Robert Solow did in 1956. He wrote a little paper which said a contribution to theory of economic growth, which later get him a Nobel Prize for this. He applied a neoclassical model in order to see why countries grow, what are the ingredients that are needed to grow, and how they are put together. So Cobb-Douglas production function can be estimated. That's what Professor Bandara and Leonaracci did. They have very nicely done that. But we should not be, there are always error terms in this, as you know. If you run a regression and you use economic model, there is always an error term. So I think you control for it, you reduce the error, and they have done a very good econometric method being used. So actually it gives us in the regression equation, tells you what are the important variables in it. So when I talk about FDI, it is there in their equation. When I take an openness, it's there in their equation. So these are well known now, 4 or 5 things that are important to increase factor productivity. You can linearize it, you can convert it into logs and make the calculation even easier. I mean, standard fare for today including Sri Lanka, to do a master's degree or advanced undergraduate degree in economics, in order to learn this technology, how to put these numbers together, run the regression and get the result. You can't eliminate it because there's uncertainty in the world. The world that we are dealing with has uncertain futures in it. So if you get a good idea about the way how to value the labor that you get, the capital, just take 2 factors, capital and labor. There are different types of capital. They are depreciated at different rates. They are employed at a different rate. For example, they are not worked throughout the week. You have to take into account how many times they are being used in a company. In the case of the economy, what is the use of capital, what is the capital output ratio for different types of activities. And then you have to estimate the equation on the input side and run it and see what type of a result you are getting. Does it make sense? Does it give numbers that are believable? Are the signs of those numbers consistent with the economics that we have learned? And so doing this way, there are a lot of people who have been doing those estimates. And to me, the important point is not the decimal place here and there, but the fact that in the large, you can see what are the important things that determine total factor productivity in Sri Lanka. So it's good for economists to worry about and write papers about, but policymakers to use these ideas when they fashion policy. So why should we liberalize the economy? Well, look at that equation. It tells you that it has a positive coefficient. And why is it that if you reduce the openness of the economy by putting export and mostly import controls, that is a cost there. So if they say buy your input domestically, that will be so many times more expensive, and so it won't work. Then you can no longer be part of the global production network if you are not able to produce inputs at a lower cost to sell to the rest of the world. And the whole world has gone that way. I mean, look, after the fall of the Soviet Union, so many people realized that this is the thing that they should be doing. Open the economies, invite foreign investment. Everybody benefits. It's a positive sum game. International trade is a positive. Both sides can benefit. It's not a zero sum game. Everybody benefits. And these are very simple but true and correct ideas that we can benefit from. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the East Asian countries, East Asia is another story. East Asian countries, they realize in the mid-60s there is no possible way of growing fast, as economic growing fast, without increase in total factor productivity. You can't do it, number one. Number two is that you can't sustain it, as we were saying, because you have to keep on investing larger and larger amounts, and you have to cut down investment because you have to get the savings in order to do the investment. And so it is the case that most of the countries, I am going to risk it and say, if somebody gives me a set of numbers for say 10 countries in the world that grew very fast in the last 30 years, I am going to bet my bottom rupee to say I will see that their productivity growth have been high. Because without a productivity growth, you can't get to that level of output growth. Simply because simple language we use in our everyday, they are more efficient. They can compete better. They can increase the size of the market. So that is the value of total factor productivity. Second thing is that not only sustainability, that efficiency spreads. So, for example, if you are able to offer people, you look at the opportunities that you see in other countries, somebody producing some item that you have in excess, even some type of rock, you can say, I can deliver you 5 tons every 6 months, and you start the business like that way. So they are open. And technology grows very rapidly, same way that because of communications, and people we have extreme ability now to in a couple of seconds to get to something. I mean, if we didn't know something, we can always go to Google it. That's when I went to graduate school, the calculator was advertised in the New York Times. For $1,700, this calculator, electronic calculator. That calculator now is being sold at less than $5 in Taiwan, Japan, in all the developed countries, $5. So can you imagine, and I teach in the class, I would say, can you apply the rate of decline in prices of these items to Mercedes-Benz? I asked them to do it. We did something. So Mercedes-Benz started with something 1968, 69, 1970 model. We apply to the Mercedes-Benz the same rate of decline of price cost to microchips, doubling every Mercedes-Benz that is 15,000 corrected to price will be something like $2,000. Of course, it won't happen, but you apply the rate at which technology has gone forward reflected in the cost, and it is open to all the countries in the world. Look at the countries in Africa that are growing rapidly. Botswana, very rapid growth, not so much so technology, but using new methods of communication. They have one of the most advanced telephone money transfer system in the world now. So people who work in Nairobi is able to send the money to their families within a couple of few minutes. I know the case where we supported some students in Vietnam because we used to go and teach there. We found a very bright student. We would send some money to buy some books and all that. And you can go to a place which they call the Little Vietnam in Virginia, United States. We used to joke and say, Ho Chi Minh Trail. You go there, your money, $100, are transferred within 10 minutes by they send email. Email will take about 1.3 seconds to go, right? And then somebody, the corresponding company, like mostly a small shop, will take that money and send in a bicycle to be delivered to the house. So you don't have to go anywhere, delivered to the house. And it is 100% sure, because if they fault in one, nobody will come to them again. So it's very accurate, very efficient. Now, if you go to a bank in the US, if I want to send $50 to somebody here, hey, I have to spend something like $15, $20 to send $50. Of course, I can send, if I had the money, $10,000, the ratio will be, cost will be lower. But see how efficient the whole place has become. So in that, you might say that in the work that Professor Jayathilaka Bandar and DNRT have done, they have broken it into two parts. Total factor product is high in countries what they call globalization friendly, and low in countries which are not globalization friendly. And I'll explain what that is. Globalization friendly is what we discuss all this time without putting that term in. Open economies, open to FDI, ability to learn quickly from the others, sending people for, being open, so globalization friendly. There's no barriers to trade, no barriers to investment, no barriers to communication there. And globalization unfriendly is that what we have, banning this item, there's a bias against exports, it takes days and weeks to get something from the customs, so many barriers like that. So it's very clear these countries that are open to the global system, globalization friendly, have higher total factor productivity. So the key conclusion, the key takeaway are very simple actually. That is what we have been talking about. Importance of TFP growth for sustained GDP growth. There's a very close correlation between the two. You cannot have TFP, you cannot have high GDP growth without TFP growth. Significant connection between the two, right? And as we said, total factor productivity is high when your economy is open to business in the rest of the world, when it's globalization friendly, than when it is not globalization. We call it globalization unfriendly. Restrictions on trade, restriction on investment, less communication with the rest of the world. So these are sort of a proven over and over again. And they are not very complicated in a way, People are not prepared to risk these things perhaps. They may be too conservative and got used to the old ways, but the takeaway is that you can do these things. We have done it ourselves. Our problem is that not that we have not done it, we have not sustained it. And we have two reasons why we didn't sustain it. One is the fact that we didn't sustain policy reform. People went to sleep after some time, after getting the big bang for buck in the late 78 to 90 period. We didn't do. The last two governments also did not do. They didn't do reform. We still have high tariffs. We still have a non-competitive economy. It's very difficult to establish companies, too costly. We should reduce the cost of doing business in Sri Lanka as a way to improve total factory productivity. And we have to keep a stable economy, in the sense we have to have competitive exchange rate. We cannot playing with the exchange rate we had done in the 2008 to 2012 period, where we are very low on reserves. We owe the world a lot of money. We have to grow grow fast in order to repay it. I mean, to have high rates of economic growth in order to repay it. And so those are the takeaways. These are very practical, important things that we see when we look at the thing, and it applies to us almost every day. We can look at it and say these things are important, and if we have the resolve to do it, we can have high total factor growth, because we start from a very low base.